I was just another invisible waitress at the most expensive wedding of the year. But when the billionaire groom looked across the room and our eyes met, everything changed. What happened next would turn my life upside down forever. This is the story of how one moment changed everything. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss what happens when fate intervenes in the most unexpected way. Trust me, this story will leave you speechless. My name is Luna, and 6 months ago, I was barely scraping by, working 3 different jobs just to afford community college, living in a tiny studio apartment that I shared with my cat, Pepper. Every dollar mattered, every opportunity counted. So, when the catering company I worked weekends for offered me a chance to work at what they called the wedding of the decade, I didn't hesitate to say yes, even though it meant giving up my Saturday off. I had no idea that accepting that job would completely change my life. The wedding was being held at the Grandview Estate, this massive mansion overlooking the city that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. As I pulled up in my beat-up Honda, watching Rolls-Royces and Bentleys glide past me like I was invisible, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. The same feeling I got every time I was reminded of how different my world was from theirs. The bride was Isabella Whitmore, heir to some old banking fortune, and the groom was Adrian Cross. Even if you lived under a rock, you'd heard of Adrian Cross. At 29, he was worth nearly $3 billion, having built his tech empire from scratch. The magazines called him a genius, the internet called him a heartthrob, and everyone called him lucky. Looking at the extravagant setup around me, with flowers that probably cost more than my rent and champagne that I couldn't even pronounce, I figured they were right. As the other staff and I got our final instructions, I tried to blend into the background. That was my strategy at these high-end events. Be helpful, be invisible, collect my paycheck, and go home. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention to myself among people who probably spent more on shoes than I made in a month. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll give them that. Isabella looked like she stepped out of a fairy tale in her custom designer gown, and Adrian looked every inch the successful billionaire in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. But something felt off. Maybe it was the way he kept checking his watch, or how his smile never quite reached his eyes. During the vows, while Isabella spoke about their perfect partnership and their shared vision for success, Adrian looked like he was somewhere else entirely. After the ceremony, cocktail hour began, and that's when my real work started. I balanced trays of champagne and fancy appetizers, weaving through crowds of people discussing stock portfolios and vacation homes. I was good at my job, efficient, polite, practically invisible. Just how I liked it. That's when it happened. I was making my way through the crowd with a fresh tray of champagne when I felt someone staring at me. You know that feeling, right? When you can actually feel someone's eyes on you. I looked up, and across the room, the groom was looking directly at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. His face had this expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise, confusion, maybe recognition. For a second, our eyes met, and I felt this weird jolt of familiarity, like déjà vu, but stronger. There was something about his face, his eyes especially, that seemed so familiar. But that was impossible. I'd never moved in circles where I'd meet billionaire tech moguls. I quickly looked away and continued serving drinks, trying to shake off the strange feeling. Rich people were weird sometimes. Maybe he was just zoning out and happened to be looking in my direction. But I could still feel his gaze following me as I moved through the crowd. About an hour later, during a quiet moment when I was refilling glasses near the garden terrace, he appeared beside me. Up close, he was even more striking than in the magazines, but it wasn't his good looks that made my breath catch. It was his eyes. Those same warm brown eyes that I suddenly remembered from a completely different time and place. "Luna Martinez," he said quietly, and my heart nearly stopped. It is you. The champagne glass I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Because in that moment, 15 years melted away, and I was 8 years old again, standing in the backyard of my childhood home in Millbrook, a small town about 3 hours from here. Adrian, I whispered, unable to believe it. Adrian Chen. He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all day. I wondered if you'd remember me. How could I forget? Adrian Chen had been my best friend when we were kids. We lived on the same street, went to the same elementary school, spent every afternoon after school together, building forts in my backyard, or riding our bikes to the creek behind his house. His family had immigrated from Taiwan when he was 5, and my family had moved to Millbrook from Mexico when I was 6. We bonded over being the new kids, the ones who were still figuring out where we belonged. But your name, I said, still trying to process this impossible situation. Adrian Cross? I had it legally changed when I turned 18, he explained. Cross was my mother's maiden name. I thought it sounded more American, more business-friendly. There was a hint of sadness in his voice when he said it. I can't believe it's really you, I said, and then immediately felt embarrassed. Here I was, in my black server's uniform, with my hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, talking to a billionaire at his own wedding. Congratulations, by the way. Your bride is beautiful. Something flickered across his face at the mention of Isabella, but before he could respond, a sharp voice cut through our conversation. Adrian, darling, what are you doing? Isabella appeared at his side, her perfect smile not quite hiding the ice in her voice. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. The photographer needs you for family photos. Of course, Adrian said, but he didn't move immediately. Instead, he looked at me and said, Luna, we should catch up properly. Would you? I'm working, I interrupted quickly. I should get back to it. Isabella's smile became even more strained. Yes, I'm sure the staff has plenty to keep them busy. The way she said staff made it clear exactly what she thought of me. As they walked away, I noticed Isabella lean in close to Adrian, whispering something that made him stiffen. I tried to focus on cleaning up the broken glass, but my hands were shaking. Seeing Adrian again had stirred up so many memories I'd buried deep. We'd been inseparable as kids. Adrian was quiet and thoughtful, always the one with the big dreams. He used to talk about inventions he wanted to create, ways he could help people with technology. I was the dreamer too, but in a different way. I wanted to be a teacher, to help other kids who felt lost like we sometimes did. The last day I saw him, we were 11 years old. His family was moving away because his father's small tech startup had gotten bought by some big company in California. Adrian had made me a friendship bracelet out of red and blue embroidery floss, my favorite colors, and made me promise to keep it forever. I'll come back for you, he'd said, with the serious intensity that only 11-year-olds can muster. When I'm rich and famous, I'll come back and find you, and we'll be best friends again. I'd laughed and told him he was silly, but I'd kept that bracelet. Even now, 15 years later, I still wore it sometimes. In fact, I was wearing it today, hidden under the long sleeves of my uniform. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I kept catching glimpses of Adrian throughout the reception, always surrounded by important-looking people, always with Isabella's hand possessively on his arm. But several times, I caught him looking in my direction, and each time, my heart did this little skip that I tried to ignore. It was during the dinner service that things got complicated. I was clearing plates from one of the head tables when I overheard Isabella talking to her friends. "Did you see Adrian talking to one of the waitresses earlier?" she was saying, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly, sometimes I think he forgets where he comes from. You can take the boy out of the small town, but apparently you can't take the small town out of the boy." Her friends laughed, and one of them said, "Well, you'll fix that soon enough. Once you're married, you can help him understand proper boundaries." "Exactly," Isabella replied. "This marriage isn't just about love, It's about building an empire. Adrian needs someone who understands that world, not some little nobody from his past. I felt sick to my stomach, not just because of her cruel words, but because of what they revealed. This wasn't a love match, it was a business transaction. And Adrian, my Adrian who used to dream about making the world better, was trapped in it. Later that evening, as the reception was winding down, I was cleaning up in the kitchen when Adrian appeared in the doorway. He'd loosened his tie, and his hair was slightly messed up, making him look more like the boy I remembered. "Luna," he said, "I've been looking for you." "You should be with your wife," I said, not looking up from the dishes I was washing. "She's not my wife yet," he said quietly. "The ceremony was just for show. We're signing the papers next week." Something in his voice made me look up. "Adrian, what's wrong?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from when we were kids, and he was frustrated about something. "Can we talk, please? Just for a few minutes?" I glanced around the kitchen. Most of the other staff had already left, and my supervisor was nowhere to be seen. "Okay, but just for a few minutes." We walked out to the garden terrace where fairy lights twinkled overhead like stars. The party was still going on inside, but out here it was quiet and peaceful. "I can't believe you're here," Adrian said, leaning against the stone railing. "All these years I wondered what happened to you. I tried to find you when I got older, but Luna Martinez is a pretty common name, and I didn't even know if you still lived in Millbrook." "I moved away for college," I said. "My mom got a job here in the city when I was 17. "And you're in school now?" I nodded. "Community college, studying education. I want to be a teacher." He smiled. "You always said that. Even when we were kids, you were always helping other people with their homework, making sure nobody got left behind." "What about you?" I asked. "Did you become the famous inventor you always said you'd be?" "Something like that." He looked out over the city lights. "Though sometimes I wonder if this is what I really wanted, or just what I thought I was supposed to want." There was something so sad in his voice that I found myself moving closer. "What do you mean?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you still have it?" "The bracelet I made you?" I felt my cheeks warm. Without saying anything, I pulled up the sleeve of my uniform, revealing the faded red and blue bracelet on my wrist. His face lit up like sunrise. "You kept it, all these years." "You made me promise," I said simply. "Luna," he started, but then stopped. He seemed to be struggling with something. "I need to tell you something. This wedding, this marriage, it's not what it looks like." "I know," I said quietly. "I overheard Isabella talking earlier." His jaw tightened. "What did she say?" "It doesn't matter." I looked down at my hands. "Adrian, you don't owe me any explanations. We were kids. People grow up, people change. You have a life here, responsibilities." "What if I don't want this life?" He interrupted. "What if seeing you tonight made me realize that I've been living someone else's dream?" Before I could respond, Isabella's voice cut through the night air. "Adrian, there you are." She appeared on the terrace, her perfect composure showing the first cracks of annoyance. "Everyone's looking for you. We need to say goodbye to your investors." She noticed me standing there and her expression hardened. "And why is the help still here? I thought I made it clear that the staff should make themselves scarce during the private reception." "Isabella," Adrian started, but she cut him off. "No, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Adrian, you can't keep getting distracted by every little thing. You have priorities now, responsibilities. People are depending on you." I felt my face burn with humiliation. "I should go," I said quickly. "Congratulations again on your wedding." I turned to leave, but Adrian caught my arm. "Luna, wait." "Let her go, Adrian," Isabella said sharply. "You're embarrassing yourself." The look on Adrian's face was torn between anger and helplessness. I could see him struggling, caught between the world he'd built and the person he used to be. I made the decision for him. "She's right," I said gently. "You have responsibilities, a life. I'm just someone from your past. I slipped the friendship bracelet off my wrist and held it out to him. You should have this back. No, Luna, please. But I was already walking away, leaving the bracelet on the stone railing. I couldn't bear to see the choice he was going to make. I already knew what it would be. In fairy tales, the poor girl gets the prince. In real life, billionaires marry other billionaires, and waitresses go home alone. I gathered my things quickly and slipped out the service entrance. The catering company would mail me my paycheck. I just needed to get out of there before I completely fell apart. I was waiting at the bus stop in the light rain that had started to fall when I heard footsteps running behind me. I turned around, expecting to see another late shift worker, but instead it was Adrian. He was still in his tuxedo, but he was soaking wet and breathing hard like he'd been running. "You forgot this," he said, holding out the bracelet. "I didn't forget it. I gave it back." "Well, I'm giving it back to you." He stepped closer, and I could see something different in his eyes, a determination that reminded me of the boy who used to declare he was going to change the world. "Luna, I made you a promise when we were kids. I said I'd come back for you." "Adrian, don't—" "I called off the wedding." I stared at him, sure I'd misheard. "What?" "I called it off. Right after you left, I told Isabella and all the guests that there wouldn't be a marriage, that I couldn't marry someone when I was in love with someone else. But the business deal, your investors—" "We'll figure something else out," he said firmly. "Luna, I've spent 15 years building a life that I thought would make me happy. But seeing you tonight, remembering who I used to be, who I wanted to be, I realized I've been living a lie." "You can't just throw away everything you've built," I protested. "For me?" "Adrian, look at me. Really look at me. I'm a part-time college student who works 3 jobs just to pay rent. We're from completely different worlds now." "Are we?" He took my hands in his. "Because the woman who kept a childhood friendship bracelet for 15 years sounds like the same girl who used to share her lunch with kids who forgot theirs. The woman who's working multiple jobs to put herself through college to become a teacher sounds like the same person who always believed in helping others." Tears were mixing with the rain on my face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe the worlds we come from matter less than the world we could build together." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes completely. "I'm saying that I've been looking for you my whole life without even realizing it." He held up the bracelet. "May I?" I nodded, unable to speak. He gently tied it back around my wrist, and then he kissed me. It was soft and sweet and tasted like rain and possibility. When we broke apart, I asked, "What happens now?" "Now," he said, "we figure it out together. I know it won't be easy. I know there will be challenges, people who don't understand. But Luna, I'd rather face an uncertain future with you than a guaranteed one without you." "And Isabella?" "Is probably planning my social destruction as we speak," he said with a rueful laugh. "But honestly, I think she's more upset about the business implications than the romantic ones. We were never really in love. We were in a merger." 6 months later, as I'm recording this story, I can tell you that he was right. It hasn't been easy. The media had a field day with the story of the billionaire who left his socialite bride at the altar for his childhood sweetheart. Some people called it romantic. Others called it a publicity stunt. But here's what they don't know. Adrian didn't just choose love over money. He chose to use his wealth and influence differently. Together, we started a foundation that provides scholarships for first-generation college students. He's been funding programs in small towns like Millbrook, places that get forgotten when people chase bigger dreams in bigger cities. As for us, we're taking things slow. I'm still in school, still working toward my teaching degree. Adrian is still running his company, but he's made changes, focusing on technology that actually helps people instead of just making money. We spend our evenings planning foundation events and our weekends visiting programs we've funded. Sometimes I look at that faded friendship bracelet on my wrist and think about the 11-year-old boy who promised to come back for me. He kept that promise in a way that neither of us could have imagined, not as the rich and famous person he thought he needed to become, but as the person he was meant to be all along. The night of that wedding, I thought I was just another invisible waitress. I had no idea that sometimes being seen by the right person can change everything, not because of their money or status, but because they remind you of who you really are underneath all the roles you think you have to play. True love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees the best version of you and helps you become that person. Adrian didn't save me. We saved each other. What an incredible story of true love conquering all. Sometimes the universe has a way of bringing the right people back together at the perfect moment. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who believes in the power of destiny. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. What do you think? Was Adrian right to leave Isabella at the altar? Let me know in the comments below.